Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perticchese, and thank you for joining me as always. Week 10 of the college football season concluded. Week 9 of the NFL season concluded just recently with Monday Night Football ending. Lot to break down here at Saturday to Sunday Football. So we're going to do it a little bit differently on this weekly recap show. We're going to do a quick NFL draft report with our S to S teams of the week. And then I thought it was a good portion now. We're about 2 months into the college football season. A lot of stuff has came in. I did a full updated draft eligible rankings. I'm going to share my top 10, my top 12 of each of the offensive skill positions, where things stand right now, some new names into the mix that I have preliminarily put in as I'm still doing a deep dive on them, and then I will put their final adjustments for where I think they fall right now during the college football season. Obviously, this stuff is all very fluid. The rest of the season, bowl season, the playoff season, and then the pre-draft months will fluctuate these rankings a lot over, the next X amount of months leading into the NFL draft. So let's jump right into it for the NFL draft report. S to S team of the week. First string team of the week is Jaden Daniels at the quarterback position. Obviously out of LSU this week. He lost to Alabama, but not because of him. 219 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, had 163 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground there. Jaden Daniels continues to see his stock elevate and move up rankings. I will talk more about him momentarily. First string running back of the week was Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. This past week, 128 yards on the ground with a touchdown, but also chipped in with 5 catches, 80 yards in the win over Rutgers. I have talked a lot about the RB1 position, the RB2, the top 5 RB positions, very fluid in terms of the college football season. Travion Henderson for sure in the mix. The first string wide receiver of the week, Malik Nabers out of LSU, 10 catches, 171 yards, and 1 touchdown against Alabama. Nick Saban uses that same Bill Belichick model of trying to take out the best defender out of the game plan, and Malik Nabers is that player on LSU, and he still put up 10 catches for 171 yards and 1 touchdown. Malik Nabers squarely in the top 2 to top 4 wide receiver mix. I'm pretty confident he's going to be off the board in the first half of round 1. And the first string tight end of the week, it's been a guy we've talked about a lot about on here, and that's Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State, 5 catches, 69 yards in that game against Texas, showing his ability to be a weapon in the passing game. I think Sinnott is ticketed for somewhere on day 2, probably a round 3 type selection. I'd be surprised if he slips to round 4, but he could be in that round 3, round 4 border. If we take this to the second string team of the week, at the quarterback position is Carson Beck out of Georgia. Georgia beat Missouri this past week. Carson Beck had 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. And out of nowhere, Carson Beck is moving himself up into position to be a guy talked about in terms of the NFL draft. He's 6'4", 220 pounds, the junior. This year, he has 2,716 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. But he's a new name at the quarterback position that I've done some preliminary deep dive into. I want to watch some more games, but he's now a guy who's squarely in the mix in that top 10, top 12 quarterbacks for this draft class. We'll see who declares, who doesn't. But Carson Beck is a guy who I think has put himself on the radar now to be in consideration for day 2. And if not day 2, an early day 3 potential if he declares and comes out early. Second string running back of the week this week is Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, 112 yards, 1 touchdown. This is a guy who does a little bit of everything. He's got good acceleration and bursts. He's got really good play strength. He's got great contact balance. He's a good receiver out of the backfield. And Jonathan Brooks is one of the hottest names right now at the running back position in college football that I think he's now put himself in the mix with Trey Benson, with Blake Corum, with Travion Henderson as being one of the top 3 to 5 running backs in college football when you're talking about transitioning to the NFL draft. So I think Jonathan Brooks is a name not being talked about a lot right now. I saw Dane Brugler had him on his just missed top 50 big board for the middle of the year, and that's obviously going to garner some attention and some eyes. But Jonathan Brooks is a name that I think is people are going to become more familiar with because you don't see him in a lot of you didn't see him in any top 5 running back boards or anything before the season started. I don't even think you saw him in top 10s, but I think he's now squarely in that mix in terms of the top 5, top 6 running backs in this class, and puts himself on the map as maybe being a day 2 guy. Maybe it's round 3, maybe it's round 4. But I think it's a down running back class, but I think Jonathan Brooks is now in the mix to be one of the top 5 running backs taken in the 2024 NFL draft. His teammate is the second string wide receiver of the week, and that is A.D. Mitchell. He had 8 catches, 149 yards, and 1 touchdown. He reminds me a lot of George Pickens in terms of the good and the developmental areas. You still want to see more refinement in terms of his route running and better understanding of route concepts and stuff like that. But his athleticism, his ability to win vertically down the field, his body control, his ball skills, his frame remind me a lot of George Pickens. He's kind of putting it all together this year. I think he's now put himself in the mix to be a round 2 or round 3 draft pick in the 2024 NFL draft. And then the second string tight end of the week, haven't talked about him during the year, but we did talk about him before the season started in the tight end show. And that's Brevin Spanford out of Minnesota. 3 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown this week. While he only has 18 catches for 167 yards on the year, he's just not an integral part of that offense. But we're talking about a guy who I think has got early day 3 potential. He's 6'7", 270 pounds. So teams are looking for those second tight ends. And I think Spanford offers a nice blend of pass catching ability, but also the size and frame to play in line. So Spanford is an interesting player that I think could be on our attention in the early day 3 portion of the 2024 NFL draft. So one honorable mention this week is we saw the best game of Raheem Sanders for this year out of Arkansas, the running back who garnered a lot of attention. He was in a lot of people's top 5 running back boards before the season started. I don't think he's there right now, but 103 yards this past week is his best game of the year. We'll see if he can kind of catapult that to increase his draft stock here down the home stretch of this football season. So there wasn't a lot of things that really stood out. So I also thought it was just a good time to maybe do a little bit of a rankings update. We're 2 months into the college football season and started, the real week started on Labor Day weekend. We're now, sitting here at November 6th, about 2 months in. I think things have shaken up a lot in terms of the landscape. So I'm going to go through my rankings a little bit here. Instead of doing a Debbie slant this week, we're going to spend a little bit longer time on the NFL draft report, but we're gonna tie it together to some rankings update. People always like to talk about rankings, so we're gonna do that for this segment of the show now before we kind of turn it over to some NFL stuff. So what I'm gonna do for people who are watching on YouTube, I'm gonna screen share. I'm gonna screen share my rankings notebook page so you guys can see my rankings if you're watching on YouTube. And let's just start talking about it a little bit. At the quarterback position, my updated rankings as of 11-6. Caleb Williams still sits there at 1, and Drake May at a UNC at 2. Before the year started, for me, it was a clear 1-2. Now it's much more a 1A, 1B. I still have it as 1 and 2 on my rankings, but it's very much now 1A, 1B. I think the scenario has now opened the door with some of Caleb Williams' inconsistencies this year and some poor decision-making and just not handling pressure as well as last year. And Drake May, Drake May has the ideal size, has the ideal frame, has the athleticism, the arm talent. He reminds me so much of Justin Herbert. So if you're talking about a guy of Justin Herbert caliber in terms of upside, he's going to be right there with Caleb Williams, because we look at Caleb Williams and we want to think, Patrick Mahomes, but like Mahomes is a certain style that works, that isn't really ever been replicated, and I'm not sure it can be replicated. But I still am a believer in Caleb Williams. I know he's had some up and downs this year, but to me, it's much more now a 1A, 1B. I think NFL teams will be very split. I think, I think about the team like the Giants, who are now unfortunately in the mix. They could look at Drake May and Brian Dable and Joe Shane might look at Drake May and think, okay, he's more of a Josh Allen type player. That's the guy we want to hitch our wagon to more than Caleb Williams. And I don't think they'd be the only team that maybe looks at that scenario the same way. So I think now it's very much a 1A, 1B scenario. I would not be surprised anymore if Drake May was taken ahead of Caleb Williams. To me, they're still the clear 1-2 quarterbacks in this class. And number 3, I have Shadu Sanders out of Colorado. Again, I've prefaced this a lot. I do not think he's coming out. I think he's going to end up staying in college, stay there with Travis Hunter, stay there with his dad for another year, and then make a decision. But right now, he's at number 3. I've been impressed with him. He's playing behind a porous offensive line. He's asked to do a lot, and I've been impressed with what I've seen out of Shadu Sanders. Number 4 is Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington. Number 5 is JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. Number 6 is Quinn Ewers out of Texas. Number 7 is Jordan Travis out of FSU. Number 8 is Bo Nix out of Oregon. Number 9 is Jaden Daniels out of LSU. And number 10 is Carson Beck out of Georgia. Just missing my top 10 was Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami, and followed by Joe Milton, Spencer Rattler, Cameron Ward, and then Riley Leonard. Things that stand out there. Jaden Daniels has made his initial move up, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure it's enough of a move up. I've been so impressed with Jaden Daniels that I think, for me, after the top 3 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Shadu Sanders, those are the guys that I think are round 1 caliber prospects. From Michael Penix through Jaden Daniels, to me, those guys are day 2 type players right now. Whether some teams might look at them as early to mid round 2, some people might look at them as, early to mid round 3. I could see a scenario for all of them. I could see shuffling them. Jaden Daniels has already made his move up to be from a day 3 player now to squarely in the mix as a round 2, round 3 guy. And I think he could continue to climb this list. JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. Some people have him as a round 1 guy right now. I'm a little bit more reserved. I need to see a little bit more. We got big games coming up for Michigan. I think it's going to tell the story a lot of JJ McCarthy, whether he can go up to number 4 on this list ahead of Michael Penix Jr., or is he going to slide back down? So right now he's slated in at number 5, but I think there could be movement there. Quinn Ewers at number 6 just hasn't shown as much growth and development as I thought he was. I thought he was going to be locked into maybe a top 10 pick in this draft. I think now he's more of a developmental day 2 type player. We'll see if he decides to come out. We'll see if he stays there. We'll see if he goes to the transfer portal with Arch Manning behind him there as well. Michael Penix, I know his season, it's been unbelievable, but I still have questions about him playing off structure. I have questions about how he would handle, without elite wide receivers. He's got a quick release. He pushes the ball vertically down the field. He does have some inconsistent ball placement and accuracy at times. I'm not sure. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of what the NFL thinks of him and what Devy and Draft Twitter think of him. I think Devy and Draft Twitter think he's a round 1 lock. I think it's a little bit more up in the air in terms of NFL landscape. I think they might have guys like Michael Penix, like JJ McCarthy, Quinn Ewers ahead of Michael Penix Jr. He's a little bit older of a prospect. He's had a lot of injuries in the past. So it's going to be interesting. I think Michael Penix Jr., he's not a guy who does a lot with his legs. He's an in-the-pocket quarterback, needs a good offensive line, doesn't make a lot of plays, off structure. So I think that's what hurts him a little bit. But what I've seen in terms of this year, I've been impressed with Michael Penix Jr. taking the next step. So for me, he sits there right now, number 4. But like I said, 4 through 9, Penix, McCarthy, Ewers, Travis, Nix, Daniels, that really can be shuffled in any which way. I know I'm a lot higher on Jordan Travis than most people. I like him more than I liked Jaron Hall last year. And Jaron Hall is a guy who I thought should have went in the 4th round last year or even late 3rd. I think Jordan Travis is a day 2 caliber prospect. I'm hoping that if Florida State makes a deep run this year, the national eyes and the attention that Jordan Travis gets kind of pushes him up to where I think he should be taken, which is somewhere on day 2. And then Carson Beck rounding out my top 10 with Tyler Van Dyke. Van Dyke, a name from the past that some people thought could be a round 1 pick in 2023. He started to show he regressed a little bit last year, showed some development and growth this year. This past week, a really poor week, but I'm not going to hold 1 week against him. I do think now he is now in the mix back in that, late day 2, early day 3 range for sure. So that's kind of how I see the quarterback landscape right now. Williams May 1A, 1B at the top. Shadu Sanders kind of in his own tier. We'll see if he comes out. And then that 4 through 9 group, very muddled. McCarthy is the guy who I think could stand alone if he plays really well down the stretch of the season. And I think Jaden Daniels could continue to climb and ascend that list as well. If we take this to the running back position, my updated running back rankings, number 1 starts and still stays with Trey Benson out of Florida State. Now, that's partially a product of him, but also partially a product. It's just been a down running back year. I still think he's a guy who I love his ability to pick up yards after contact. I love his power, his play strength, his footwork, his balance. So a lot of things I like about Trey Benson. Blake Corum at number 2 out of Michigan. Travion Henderson at number 3 out of Ohio State. Number 4, Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. Number 5, Donovan Edwards out of Michigan. Number 6, Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. Number 7, I still have Raheem Sanders there out of Arkansas. Number 8, Will Shipley out of Clemson. Number 9, Bucky Irving out of Oregon. Number 10, Audric Esteem out of Notre Dame. So those are the guys that kind of have in my top 10 right there. Other names that I think are new to the mix that are a little bit interesting is running back Devin Neal. He'd be another guy that I would say it looks like for some reason he came off of my list, but he should be right there. And I'll put him in right now. He should be right there at number 11, right after Audric Esteem, just missing out on my top 10. He's another interesting player that I've been getting into and doing a little bit more of a deep dive to on him as well. So there hasn't been a lot of movement in this. I would say the new names added to the top 10, 11 there have been Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. I talked about him before. I think he could continue to push his way into the mix to be above Donovan Edwards, above Braylon Allen, above Travion Henderson. That's how impressed I've been with him. Audric Esteem out of Notre Dame and Devin Neal out of Kansas. They're the new names added to the mix here. But again, it's been a very ho-hum year that I think the running back landscape is going to kind of really be dictated by the conclusion of this year. And then some tiebreakers are going to be things like the All-Star games. If any of these guys, are eligible for any of them, that I don't really know sometimes, as most of them are underclassmen besides Blake Corum. But sometimes in terms of, graduation requirements, sometimes some of these guys get to be in there. We'll see about the combine and athletic testing. I think that might separate these guys a little bit. But right now, Benson's my guy still at the top, even though he hasn't had this great year. But I don't think any of the running backs really have had. I think Jonathan Brooks has been the most impressive guy, and I think he's moving up this board. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he eventually, moves higher up this list. So let's take this to the wide receiver position. Updated top 10. Let's start there. Number 1 is Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. Number 2 is Malik Nabers out of LSU. Number 3 is Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Number 4 is Rome Odunze out of Washington. Number 5 is Emeka Egbukpa out of Ohio State. Number 6 is Troy Franklin out of Oregon. Number 7 is Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. Number 8 is Xavier Worthy out of Texas. Number 9 is Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. Number 10 is A.D. Mitchell out of Texas. Number 11 is Devontae Walker out of UNC. Number 12 is James Polk out of Washington. Number 13 is Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. And I'll stop at number 14 right now is Jalen McMillan out of Washington. Actually, one more. I'll go 15. J. Michael Sturdivant out of UCLA. And then there's still really other talented names. Drew Swells out of South Carolina, unfortunately, the injury. Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. Are some other guys there just outside my top 10. So big differences and changes since before the season started. New names that have been added to the mix. Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. Malik Nabers, running mate. He's been super impressive this past year. I talked about him on one of the SS teams of the week. 6'4", 205 pounds. Great size, frame, ability to go up and win at the catch point. Love the package. I'm in the middle of doing a deep dive on Brian Thomas Jr. I'm going to do an episode where I go into deep on a lot of these guys that weren't on before the season started and give my full detailed scouting report on these players. But Brian Thomas is a new name to the mix. James Polk is a new name to the mix. We did talk about him on a couple SS teams of the week shows, but the redshirt sophomore, 6'2", 204, I think he's now put himself in position that his upside and ceiling might even be higher than his teammate Jalen McMillan. Not the same level of Rome Odunze, but also in his own right, very impressive. We'll see as a redshirt sophomore if he comes out. So things that really kind of standing out here at the running back, at the wide receiver position, I still have Malik Nabers at number 2, but before the season started, for me, he was a clear-cut number 2. I think now Keon Coleman and Rome Odunze, they are right on his heels. So it's very hard to separate them. To me, Marvin Harrison is in his own tier, and then Nabers, Coleman, and Rome Odunze make up the next tier. They are all guys I think should be gone in the first 15 picks of the NFL draft. I think this should be going back to what we saw in the 2022 NFL draft when we had Drake London, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Jahan Dotson. We saw all those Garrett Wilson. We saw all those wide receivers go in the top 15, top 16 picks. I think we're going to have that this year. I think we're going to see 4 in the top 12 to top 15. That's how special these players are. If somebody wants to have Keon Coleman at number 2, I think that you can make the strong argument. He still might move up to number 2 for me. Same thing with Rome Odunze. Neighbors, Coleman, and Odunze, I can re-rank them in any which way and make a strong justification. I think more than one of them could sneak into the top 10 or top 12, like I talked about. I think you could see 4 wide receivers potentially go very, very early in the 2024 NFL draft. Egbukwe has been injured a little bit, but I still have him there as a solid round 1 prospect, somewhere maybe in the 20s. And then Troy Franklin has been the biggest mover up from a guy who I thought was on that round 3, round 4 border before the season started. To me, he's now squarely in the mix as an early day 2 prospect, a round 2 guy. We'll see if he can push his way into the round 1 mix. That's how impressive he's been this year. If we get a big run on wide receivers early, it would not be stunned to see Troy Franklin jump into the mix there in late round 1 or early round 2. Brian Thomas, like I talked about, his draft stock is skyrocketing right now. Really impressed with Brian Thomas. Going to do a deep dive on him and share my full detailed scouting thoughts on him. Xavier Worthy, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I think the draft Twitter and Devy Twitter, myself included, is a little bit higher on him than the NFL circles. I think he's very much like a Hollywood Brown type player. So I'm still a fan of him and going to see what he can do in the pre-draft months. I think people want speed, and he has that speed. A.D. Mitchell, Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky, the Debo comps are going to be there. You could do a lot of different things with Malachi Corley. Teams are going to be intrigued with him somewhere on day 2. A.D. Mitchell, talked about him before. George Pickens style player. I think he's squarely in the mix now to be a day 2 guy. Devontae Walker back from, back with the team a couple weeks ago, and he is hitting the ground running. I think he's very much in the day 2 mix. Same thing with James Polk. I think if he comes out, his stock is soaring. He could be a top 50 player for sure. Talked about Ladd McConkey last week and Jalen McMillan. Those are guys, very impressive seasons. I could see McConkey going somewhere in round 3. I could see Jalen McMillan somewhere in that later round 3 mix as well. Really strong class. I think we're going to have back to 15 to 17 wide receivers taken in the top 100. It's a fun group, and I think we're going to see some movement at the top in that 2 through 4 area. And then I think, that 6 through 10 area, very close knit together. We could see some separation during the pre-draft months for sure. If we take this to the tight ends, Brock Bowers sits at number 1. Number 2, Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. Number 3, Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. Number 4, Cade Stover out of Ohio State. Number 5, Bryson Nesbitt out of North Carolina. Those are the guys who I think have legit chance. Obviously, Bowers is going round 1. I think Jatavian Sanders is more of a day 2 guy, probably round 2. And then I think Sinnott, Cade Stover, and Bryson Nesbitt, they're more round 3 type players. After that, I have Luke Lachey at number 6, Jaheim Bell at 7, Theo Johnson at 8, and Eric All at 9. Obviously, all out the season with an injury. I think Theo Johnson could be a guy who sneaks in the late round 3, early round 4. Jaheim Bell, that movable chess piece like Okonkwo, and Luke Lachey, another guy I'm intrigued with. Could see him going back to school as well. So it's really the top 5 there are guys that I think I'm really intrigued with, and I think we'll see them come off the board in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So there it is, guys, my updated rankings. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Let's spin this over to the NFL side of things for a little bit with a quick rookie report. Rookie quarterbacks playing all over the place in the NFL. Let's start with CJ Stroud. 30 of 42, 470 yards and 5 touchdowns. Right now his stock is soaring. Everything we saw in that Georgia game has came to fruition as the guy who, again, I talked about it. I went on the Football Guy show and I said that what CJ Stroud did in that last game, to me, changed the whole narrative on him as a player. He looked like he could handle pressure. It looked like he can play off structure. And we have seen that come to fruition now. And it's been a really impressive start to his career. And I think right now the Texans have found their long-term answer. If we were redrafting today, I think hands down, CJ Stroud's the first quarterback off the board. As much as I love Anthony Richardson, that injury factor still, I think CJ Stroud would be the guy most people take. I think Anthony Richardson would be 2. I think, unfortunately, Bryce Young would be 3, maybe, because Will Levis continues to look good. I know they lost the game the other day, but that was not to do with Will Levis. 22 of 39, 262. Some of his plays really impressive there in that game last Thursday night against Pittsburgh. Aiden O'Connell has taken over now the Vegas job with the change there in the regime. 16 of 25, 209 yards. Got an easy victory over the Giants this past week. Jaron Hall got the start for Minnesota. He got injured and left the game. Clayton Tune played for Arizona for 1 week. He really struggled in his debut there. But it's really the story's all about CJ Stroud and Will Levis as well, looking impressive again in his second game, even in the loss there for the Titans. If we take this to the running backs, don't forget Devin Achane set to come off IR really soon. We'll see if he can get right back in the mix and being that star-studded rookie that we saw for a couple weeks, early in the year. Jahmyr Gibbs, this is from week 8. He had a bye week 9, but on week 8, he played on Monday Night Football when I was recording. He showed he could carry a heavy workload. Obviously, they don't want to give him 26 touches, but with David Montgomery out, 26 touches, 152 yards and 1 touchdown, total explosiveness for Jahmyr Gibbs. He should be way high in running back rankings right now for dynasty leagues, just because of the position as a whole is really struggling, to say the least. Jahmyr Gibbs right there in that top 5 mix for sure. At the wide receiver position, Tank Dell exploding again with CJ Stroud, 6 catches, 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm not sure there's going to be I'm sure when the dust settles, he's going to clearly have been the best value in all 2023 fantasy rookie drafts, dynasty rookie drafts, because Dell was going like ridiculously late, like early to mid third, some late thirds. I mean, this is a guy who I had pegged as a guy warranted going right there in the mid to late second, where guys like Jalen Hyatt, Marvin Mims, Rashee Wrights were going. I thought Tank Dell should have been right there in the mix, but unfortunately, a lot of people were overly worried about the size. Excuse me. At the tight end position, Dalton Kincaid, 10 catches this past week, 81 yards. He is now fully integrated as one of the focal points of that pass offense there for Buffalo. Great to see Dalton Kincaid. I continue to say this tight end class is going to be very special in terms of what we get out of it. And then let's end with a quick NFL Dynasty report. Since there were no big storylines, I decided for what I'm going to do for this week, a quick buy or sell from some of the positions. At the quarterback position, I'd be buying Kyler Murray right now. I think we have forgotten that when he's at his best, he's a real impactful fantasy asset. And he's been out of sight, out of mind. He hasn't played yet this year. He might even be rusty in week 1. But a team who has Kyler Murray probably made plans for this year, so he might be their backup. I'd be a little aggressive trying to go get Kyler Murray. We talked about the landscape at a quarterback position last week. It's not pretty. So a guy like Kyler Murray, now might be the time to go get Kyler Murray right now. If we're talking about selling, I would be selling Deshaun Watson. He had a decent game this past week. I just don't see the ceiling coming back for Deshaun Watson. I think he still might have more name value than real value. So if I was you and someone still thinks he has the ceiling to be back to that top 5, top 8 quarterback range, I'd sell right now. So sell Deshaun Watson, buy Kyler Murray at the quarterback position. At the running back position, sell Tony Pollard. As much as it pains me, he's 27 years old. He's a free agent after the year. This was his first year he was asked to be the guy. I don't know what the future holds for Tony Pollard. I doubt it's ever going to be what we thought this year was going to offer him, and it didn't pan out. So I have been the biggest supporter for years. I said, buy Tony Pollard. If he still is holding value as a top 12 dynasty running back, and he probably is based on the lack of options there, I would try to get out now if somebody is looking at him as still a top 12 asset. I think he belongs at the back end of that top 12, but right now it's more of a lack of options than anything he's done on the field. In terms of guys I'm buying, I want to get in on Ty Spears now when he probably only costs like an early second round rookie pick. They kept Derrick Henry, so some people might be like, oh, well, Henry's going to still be there. I would still want to get in on Ty Spears right now. At the wide receiver position, my guy that I'm going to say to buy right now, it's a tough one. The running back position a little bit harder than the other positions. I think the guy that I'd want to be buying right now is Drake London. I think that offense as a whole right now still very much broken. I think there might be a regime change at the end of the year. I think now might be the time that Drake London will cost less than he will down the line. So he'd be my buy. My sell might be a little controversial, but I'm going to say sell Cooper Kupp. I think I would not be stunned if Matthew Stafford is not the quarterback of the Rams next year. I think at some point they're going to blow this up. Does Cooper Kupp get traded with the success of Puka Nacua? I mean, he's an older prospect, but he could still bring back so much value. So if you're not trying to win right now and you're not an elite team, I would love to see what you can get for Cooper Kupp. I'd rather get out a tad early on guys like Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, than hold them and then them lose a lot of their value. Again, if you're winning and you're contending right now, no, you can't trade these guys. But if you're not, if you're on the peripheral right beyond that, and you're going to make the playoffs, but not a legit contender, or if you're not a playoff contender, I think selling those wide receivers at that age who still have really high value is a smart decision if you can get back a haul back in either picks or young players and stuff like that. Tight end position, I didn't really see anything glaring in terms of buys or sells for this week, so I wasn't going to force the issue there. So there it is, guys, a little bit buy and sell in the dynasty landscape there at the quarterback position. Again, just reiterating, buy Kyler Murray, sell Deshaun Watson at the running back position, sell Tony Pollard would be my thing at the running back position. At the wide receiver, and buy Tyjae Spears at the wide receiver position, sell Cooper Kupp, and buy Drake London. So there it is, guys. Another episode in the books. If you are enjoying the show, please get over to the website, rate, review, and subscribe. Best way to support the show to help us continue to grow. In terms of the website, get over to the website, ssfootball.com is the fastest and easiest way to get to the website and check out our premium content. For $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nicano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.